I would like to begin this episode by acknowledging that I am located in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I am privileged and honored to live and learn on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishnaabeg Algonquin Nation.
Hello, you're listening to Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front, produced by iGlen Studios, a show for emerging leaders from all professions. To hear from other leaders who have led from the front, made the mistakes, had the triumphs, and are still learning along the way. And now, here's your host, Simon Cardinal.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front. Have you ever had a feeling of being absolutely certain of someone's emotions? Or maybe you had a sense of what your team was thinking or feeling? This is your intuition, and it's a powerful tool to have in your leadership toolbox. But how do we use it? How do we recognize it? How do we understand it? In this episode, you'll hear from Seth Santoro, an intuitive leadership expert, psychic medium, best-selling coach, and an intuitive healer. And Seth will help us discover how to use our natural intuitive skills to help guide others as we lead from the trenches. But like always, it's not about me, it's about the guest. So I'm going to try and be quiet and go ahead and introduce Seth. Hey, Seth, how's it going out there?
Hey, what's up, Simon? I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, thanks so much for coming out for this. This has been a long time coming. I'm so thankful for having met Brooke and all the different connections she's made, but this one feels special. And I mean, I'm not that there's no pun intended based off of the topic, but there's just the connection that we had. I think there's something there. And I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to not only be able to be a conduit for your message, but to also build another friendship. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here and super happy. And, I'm going to do my best to, give you myself and my coaching and also, or my thoughts, but also kind of tune into whoever, the universe, God, whatever you believe are out there, angels, guides, all that stuff. So yeah, it'll be fun. And I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. But listen, before we get into it, I'd like to just point out that I am wearing my black golf shirt with the Trench Leadership logo. I have my microphone in front of me. While I have my microphone in front of me, my background is a screenshot of the stone wall with the Trench Leadership logo in white hanging off of that, and the logo is surrounded in a purple haze. Seth is wearing what I believe is like a beige-ish type of sweater. He's got a
with
beard.
Snowflakes.
Oh, with snowflakes? I can't even see that. It looks amazing. You're thinking about, helping out your fellow, your other Canadian friends out there. We got some snow today. Seth has a beard. He's got some dark hair. He's got some headset on. And his background walls are a beige or a white, and there's a bunch of books and different photos all over the place. It's very nicely done. Before we get going, though, why don't we take a moment? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and like how you got to this point?
Yeah, sure. I am a smilologist and an intuitive healer, and a best-selling author. I'm also a psychic medium. I do intuitive business coaching. I specialize in intuitive leadership, which we're going to talk about today. I basically started I wanted to be an actor, to be honest, like 25 years ago. And my parents instilled upon me, like, you need to have a plan B, you need to have a plan B. So when the acting didn't really, or modeling or singing didn't really work out, I started in HR and operations of all places in the world. And I also did coaching. So I got a coaching degree, and then I just started in HR. And I started executive coaching at some point in my career. And then all of a sudden, about 10 years ago, the psychic world opened up to me. I literally kind of rolled over and stopped a pattern of dating unavailable men and who didn't understand my love language. And then the world opened up to me. So since then, I've been exploring, mediumship, connecting with deceased loved ones and animals. At first it started though with just humans. Then it became intuitive readings, so talking about people's not so distant past, their present, and their not so distant future. Then it became prenatal reading, so I could talk to little babies that weren't born yet. Then all of a sudden, I discovered that I had intuitive healing hands. After that, I discovered I could talk to animals, living or deceased, and that was strange. Like when you're talking to a cheetah in South Africa, that's pretty cool. Um, and my vision is to inspire 1 billion people to heal and overcome grief from trauma and loss and smile from the inside. And that's pretty much what brought me here. Oh no, sorry. So about 3 years ago, I decided there's got to be a way, and there's got to be a reason why I've been in corporate America for so long, and how to combine all of my gifts and the passions, right? So there's the HR operations corporate side, and there's this executive coaching side, and then you add this intuitive coaching. So I like to call it intuitive leadership. My clients, I call intuitive business coaching clients. And yeah, so now I help bestsellers become bestsellers or write their book. And I also help ambitious influencers, celebrities, and business owners overcome grief. And then I also do executive coaching with an intuitive flair. That's what I call it.
I love all of that. I love how you're able to bring all of it together because, I mean,
Yeah.
let's say it's facts in the corporate environments, the corporate worlds, however we want to term that. More often than not, when people are looking for help, they're not looking for an intuitive type of help. They're looking for, what can I do to be successful right now? You tell me the 3-step plan that I need to do. I will successfully complete that plan and move forward and get promoted. So to be able to look at that from a heart-centered perspective and make a career out of that, I think is saying something about not just the brand that you're bringing, but your ability as a person to make it so that people want to follow it. I think there's something there.
Yeah, it's gaining momentum. And I just love helping people feel better and living life again. And so it's everything that I'm about. Even as I was starting this and I was doing more HR and corporate America than coaching, when I started coaching at the end of the day or in the middle of the day, it was such a grounding experience. And I remembered this is my purpose. This is why I'm here on this earth, to help people just feel better or write their bestsellers or overcome that grief, overcome that trauma. And it's just it's a crazy, lovely adventure.
Well, and I'm very happy to be a part of this adventure. And thank you so much for allowing the show to be a venue to make that happen. It seems to me, though, that if we're going to talk about intuition, intuitive leadership, and those types of things, that's a
Yeah.
specific kind of mindset that we would
Mhm.
have to discuss. And maybe we could talk about that a little bit before we get into talking about intuition and how that relates to emerging leaders.
Sure. So, uh, mindset is what 80% of the game, right? So when I'm working with my clients, I make sure that they are radically honest with themselves. In other words, what is your current state? Like I can kind of speak two languages. I can speak the woo and I can speak to corporate and pragmatic. So I'm going to speak both now. But we need people to, if they're going to do this work and really dive into this work, they need to be ready, but they need to be very, very honest with themselves, like more honest than they've ever been before. Like, where are they now? What are they struggling with? What can they like, and then their future state too, right? So like, it's not just about current state, it's about future state. But if you're not honest with yourself, you cannot dive in and create this. Essentially, what I like to think about is I help people create better legacies and futures. So the mindset is 80% of the game, right? So it's very, very important that you're open and that you are radically honest with yourself.
Oh, I
Thanks for
couldn't agree with you. Oh, thank you very much. And I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think about when I started my master's degree, a Master of Arts in Leadership. One of the big challenges I came across was went into this program. I was still in the regular force. I was still very much had the military mindset, thinking I knew everything I needed to know about leadership. And then I get there, and in my cadre, my cohort, I was the only military person, and I was very quickly forced to make a decision: either open my mind and have an open mindset to these new, weird, fuzzy, warm-hearted things I was certainly not used to hearing about, or I could shut myself down and get through the 2 weeks and then just keep working on the essays like nothing had changed. I
Right.
chose the first option, and admittedly, the pendulum went hard to the opposite direction, and I was all about leading with my heart, and I'm only going to do it this way. But then I quickly realized that I needed to find something in the middle that was what I like to
Yeah.
call Simon leadership, and and we just figure it out, and it works for me, and it might not work for you, it might not work for someone else, but it's the brand and the style that works for Simon.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that's ultimately what it's about, is being open-minded to understanding, taking bits that works for everyone. Does that make sense at all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
All right. Well, I'm happy to hear that. And this feels like a great way to start rolling into talking about intuition, because one of the things that new leaders are going to come across is they're going to question themselves more often than not. They're going to
Hmm.
question their skills, their abilities, what they're doing there, who thought that may even have that the skill set to get into those roles, especially if they were promoted into the role based off of technical ability and not necessarily leadership abilities. But that's the thing about it. It's about listening to ourselves, understanding that you were selected and knowing that you have those abilities inside of you. You just need to unlock them. Sometimes it's
Absolutely.
not as just as that simple, but there's that. And one of the tools we need to unlock is our intuition, trusting our gut senses and trusting what we need to know, and that we have those skills. So with that in
Hmm.
mind, before we get into it, I would like to offer the Cambridge Dictionary definition of intuition. And I'd like
Ooh.
to know what you think about that. And then
Okay.
maybe you could provide your definition of intuition. Would that be
Sure.
okay?
Absolutely.
All right. So the Cambridge Dictionary defines intuition as the ability to understand or know something immediately based on your feelings rather than facts. I think that's
Ooh.
kind of interesting.
Ooh, that's harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. What struck me funny about that was it was a very pragmatic sentence about something that is about pretty much the antithesis of pragmatism. So,
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying it's harsh.
yeah. What are your thoughts? Do you want me to read it again?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Uh, I mean, there's so much to say about that, right? And we're going to talk about some of the things too, but I believe that intuition is a way to, well, what do I think about that? I do think it's a little harsh. I think, just because something you can't see something, well, I guess that's the definition of a fact. I don't know why I can't get past the word fact right now. But yeah, I mean, we receive information in various different ways. And it's something I want to we'll talk about soon. So I think it's how we receive that information that is not from a standard book or its fellow person, or like a more, I want to say, objectionable or objective place, right? So again, like not from a book, not from reading it online, not from AI, just like something that does not come from something that you read and that's tangible. So I define intuition as the receiving of information that's really not there or wasn't there 2 seconds before. Um, I also believe that there's two separate types of intuition. So I believe there's a professional intuition, and I believe there's a more kind of universal or godly type intuition. The reason I say that is because when I've been in HR for a long time, and I know, professionally speaking, I know that if A and B happens, then C and D will most likely happen because that's what's happened 9 times out of 10 in the past 25 years, right? So I believe that that's professional. I think that's when you're listening to your gut at work. That's, I believe, professional intuition. It's conditioned intuition. However, I believe there's something else too that we all get to tap into, and those are feelings and information that come from other people or from other places. And I believe that's more kind of the godly or the worldly or the universal version of intuition. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thank you very
Okay.
much for that. I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
and when we're talking about intuition and leadership, there is something about that gut check, but it's not always a gut check. It's just a feeling. It's there's a sense of something is going to happen if you do these things right. Because some would argue that it could be based off prior knowledge and prior experiences, but when we're talking about leading a team, quite often there's a sense of dread and not believing in ourselves, and that's tough. It's a tough way to go. So how can we work with that?
Yeah. I don't know if that was rhetorical or if you want me to answer.
Maybe you answer that. It started out rhetorical, but I'm going to let you answer it.
How do we work with that? I I believe that if we are feeling something and it's not like an emotion, so it's more of a piece of information about something of which we are passionate about, I believe we should listen and we get to listen. Um, I like even when I'm leading now or facilitating, sometimes I still have that imposter syndrome of like, oh my God, like I'm doing this, like I'm leading this or I'm facilitating this. So, and I think that's completely normal. But sometimes though, as I'm leading or as I'm facilitating, something will break through and be like, wait, say this because this is what everyone needs to hear right now. And I think it's a whole other level of kind of listening to intuition. But there's so many things to consider when being a leader that I believe that intuition is not ever spoken about. Like to listen to what you know, listen to what you feel from a professional perspective.
One of the things that you and I had spoken about during our pre-chat was that you feel there are two different, I don't want to say types of intuition, but two different ways to look at it from a perspective. One is that we can learn how to be intuitive, and the other
Mhm.
is that it's something that we can massage and
Yes,
we can develop it. Would you like to talk to the audience about the two different types that you spoke about?
of course, of course. I so it's interesting because if even if we talk about professional intuition versus like an intuitive development class that I'm teaching, in professional intuition, you have learned certain behaviors and conditioned yourself and practiced literally seeing how the world works 9 times out of 10. So even that is somewhat conditioned in a way. Um, and then it comes to like an intuitive course class where we're in it. And I think that it's really funny because the people that start that don't think they have any intuitive ability or psychic abilities at all usually blow everyone away because they don't know what they don't know. And so they just they just tap into whatever they're feeling and they just go with it. Right. So I feel like the first class, you're amazing in your first class. And then the second class, you start kind of dissecting it and you're like, oh no, and now I suck. Right. But after 3 or 4 classes or courses, you are starting to learn the nuances and the subtleties because this work that we do is completely subtle. And sometimes the voices or the feelings or the information that we receive is extremely quiet and subtle and you have to pay attention and listen. So for me, the both can be both kind of intuitive types can be learned and practiced and experienced to grow for sure.
I really appreciate your perspective on that and understanding that it's not just something that we just have to figure out. And are you either intuitive or you're not? It is a muscle. And
Yes.
like any muscle, we can work it and make it stronger and use it to our advantage. I also think there's a lot of power in the point that you brought up, and that some people that sure they're just going to get it easier than others.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same token, that doesn't mean they're the be all end all. There's other things that you're going to get that they won't get. And it's all different people are different. That's why that works out that way.
Absolutely.
But if we can't figure it out, that's okay. If only we knew someone who was an intuitive coach that could help people get in touch with that. Find
If
someone.
only.
So I'm curious, while we're talking about these things, do you
Yeah,
have any, like, do you want to talk about would you like to talk about some ways that people can learn how to tap into their intuition?
absolutely.
Hmm.
I mean, I even have kind of the 8 principles of intuitive leadership. Um, and it is something new that I've been working on, something new that I'm releasing, but I've been working on it for probably years, like putting it all together. And I've had like a 2019 version, 2020 version, 2021 version, all these things. And I've just been refining it. And I believe there's even more work to do on it. So it is a work in progress, but it is definitely, I believe there are 8 principles that go along with intuitive leadership. So shall we
Let's get right at
You
it.
want
Yeah,
to
let's
dive
go.
in?
Let's dive right in. Hit us with principle number one.
All right. So principle number one essentially is awareness, right? So it's the key to awareness. And I believe that there are 6 levels of awareness, and I've actually done this like a talk about the 6 levels of awareness in different companies. So first we'll talk about what is awareness. Just being aware of what's going on around us. But there's the 6 levels are fascinating. So we'll just go one by one. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You're the guest. You go. I'll tell you if we need to go somewhere else.
All right. All right. So level number one is what I like to call it is called metacognition. So metacognition is the awareness of being aware. So I'm aware that I'm thinking of this, or I'm aware that I'm seeing myself in a mirror and I look like this today. The interesting thing is, other than humans, there's about a dozen species of animals that they've actually tested doing a mirror test. And if the animal can recognize themselves apart from anyone else, then it's one indication that they have metacognition. So there's like elephants, of course, because they're, dolphins, some types of monkeys, some dogs, but not all dogs. There's like, there's magpies, there's gray parrots, certain gorillas. So it's really crazy that these animals have this type of metacognition, and this is what sets us apart from all the other species in the planet, is our level of metacognition. So level number two, inner awareness. So this is all about being in touch with your emotions, and I believe that I'm cognizant of my emotions about 85% of the time, and I think that's pretty good. So that's what I think everyone I think that's what everyone should strive for. And when I'm with my clients, I literally talk to them about, like, are you in touch with your emotions? Are you in touch with your feelings most of the time? What is your default level of contentment? For example, like most people would say that my usual demeanor is like super happy and smiling and refreshing. And this is how I am almost all the time. But if I'm not this way, then I know something is up. And I start searching for what's going on. So, I feel like everyone needs to decide or identify what their default level of contentment is. And another thing about inner awareness is, how do we respond to adversity, right? So if someone cuts you off in traffic, in LA, this is like the funniest thing. But if someone cuts you off in traffic, do you freak out? Right? Do you, like, what do you do? I usually take a deep breath in, I don't say anything, and then it takes me maybe 30 seconds to calm down. My sister, however, God love her, she's told me last year she has road rage. I'm like, what is that? Anyway, so it's about also knowing how you respond. It's just one kind of example of adversity, but it's important how we respond. So the second level, or the third level actually, is self-awareness. So this is, I believe, how we show up in the world. How do others see and experience us, and what others might say about us? So I only take what people say about me with a grain of salt. However, I have on occasion sent out an email or a text to a bunch of my friends being like, hey, how am I showing up these days? Or how am I showing up in the past year? How do you see me? What can I improve on? It's a very scary email. Very scary email.
I could what is this?
Right. But people responded, and how I show up in the world is so important, right? How I show up at the office, how I show up in my love life, how I show up in relationships. These are all super important. And for me to be aware of how I show up, that is self-awareness. So moving right along, then there's social awareness. So within social awareness, this is essentially how we've been socialized in our life and how we've grown up. So there's nature and nurture in this particular social awareness level. And there's sub-levels here. So I believe the self, right? Like, do you like yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you hate yourself? And I'm talking most of the time, right? So these are questions I ask all of my clients. Then we talk about family. and or guardians, right? And this is a biggie. And I break this down into 3 parts. So because I believe in all of I figured out the other day, I've sat with at least 2,000 people talking about grief, trauma in some way, shape, or form. And that's not even including everything else I've done. That's a lot of people. And I found that there are 3 major parts of a person's life to do with their family that, what's the word I'm looking for? That represent where they are and what they've been through. So I think the childhood is number 1, and then the individuation process, and then the current kind of state with their family. So between those 3, you can figure out what you've been through. And it's funny because, not funny, but because I'm working with clients and because I can tap into them, I call it tapping into them, tapping into who they are and their energy, I can see those 3 distinct parts of their family and guardians, and that's how I know that's how I can recognize where to go next with them. So then next we have supervisors and authority figures. How do your past interactions dictate your present ones, right? Like when a police officer pulls you over, like I have friends that get so upset about it, and then I have myself that I'm like, whatever, it's a ticket, no biggie. So then we go on to the romantic side, right? There's such a wealth of information and wisdom here when you dive into what you've been through romantically in your life, how many relationships you've had, long-standing ones, the short-standing ones. It's all part of who you are. Then we talk about coworkers. So how do you treat coworkers, right? Like past coworkers, current coworkers. How do you want your future relationships to be? These are all questions that we encounter under social awareness. And then we have friends and influencers, right? So do you have a lot of friends? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you have a small group of solid, amazing friends? Exploring all those questions. And then finally, kind of the last part of social awareness and how we've been socialized is, have we been taught to co-create ever in our lives? And if so, like, what is that relationship? What does that look like? What are you co-creating? And then what are you co-creating toward your divine higher self? And I know that's where we get a little woo in this topic, but the point is, like, what are you co-creating to create for your future? Does it all make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's all about understanding the way how I'm interpreting it. It's about understanding yourself and paying attention, as you said right in the beginning of it, paying attention to yourself and understanding the different aspects. I do have a question though. I am curious. Our moods change, our attitudes change. We mature, we evolve. So it seems to me that that's a big part of understanding. So you can't just sit and look at 8 points and go, okay, got it. I know who I am. Next, it's a constant process. It's a journey. It's not not a sprint. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And further to that point, we are all works in progress, and we are if we are not evolving, then I tend to think that we are staying stagnant or going back in who we are, right? So I think that, I don't know why I just got this hit to say this right now in this moment, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I believe that there are 3 definites in this lifetime, right? So there's death, there's taxes, but then there's grief. We're all going to experience that grief or adversity, right? I think I like the word adversity better. So the quicker we can figure out our patterns and what we've been through, the better off we will be, and the easier and more productively and effectively we can handle anything in our future. And I think that's one of the major pillars of the intuitive leadership kind of whole thing, is to learn what works for us.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's a common thread and a theme that I hear is what works for us. And that's actually the whole point of one of the main points of having this podcast is to offer different perspective and different ideas and tools. And one might not work for one person, but they might work for the other. And the trick is to keep listening to episodes of the podcast and find one that works for you. That's a shameless plug.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. All right. So to finish up, there's, I think we're up to 5 now, So the 5th, level of awareness is organizational awareness. And so here are the questions that I ask my clients constantly. Like, can you read a room? Can you read or anticipate others, right? So this is where we start to get into the more intuitive sense or the professional intuition. Are you aware of the corporate dynamics, office dynamics, team dynamics? Because there always are dynamics. It's often referred to as the game, but and then can you feel what others are going through, right? So like these are where the buzzwords empath and highly sensitive person come into play in terms of our kind of corporate environment. Um, and I think, like, are you the type of person that when someone who works for you is not, is not feeling well, or you can tell something's wrong, like the fact that you can tell that something's wrong is already a really great sign of your social awareness and your organizational awareness. So lastly, world awareness. So the questions I ask myself or my clients is, what's happening in the world? Can you feel what's happening in the world? What are you doing about it? What's your purpose and vision to help? How can you pay it forward? So this is essentially, we went literally from the micro to the macro version. So we dive into those, areas intensely. And the funny part about the whole thing is I find when I'm coaching someone, any situation they're having, we can always bring it back to some type of awareness, right? Or some type of healing method or some, like it is amazing. Like I have clients that I'm like, okay, so this week I wanted to talk about, but you're talking about it anyway. So let's just keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
So the number one, I believe the key to, so it's mindset, right? That's like the pre-work that we all have to do. And then number one is kind of the key to awareness and what are the levels of awareness? Because without awareness, I don't believe we can move forward in the process. And I feel like actually awareness is the key to healing, is the key to being a better leader. It's a key to being a better lover, being a better in better relationships with people. I think it is one of the most important things in life, really. Okay, so then we get into healing work, right? And I've actually created two methods for healing. So one is called the SMILE method, and it's a method from healing from current trauma, obstacles, or adversity. And then the other one we'll talk about is the GRACE method and how to heal your past, essentially once and for all. I've also written books around these, right? So one's called Smile from the Inside, the other one's called From Grief to Grace. So here are, as I said, like my vision was to inspire 1 billion people to heal and smile from the inside. When I say smile from the inside, I don't mean being happy all the time. I just want to say that. I mean, you have done the work and you know what to expect. You have the awareness. You are intentional about what you're doing in life. And when adversity hits, you deal with it. So smiling from the inside it's not about, I believe honestly that happiness is our fleeting moments. So I instead seek joy and joyous moments. But smiling from the inside is about being okay with who you are, loving who you are, and then having this awareness and then going through kind of anytime adversity hits, you are, whether you're okay or not, right? You can be a mess or not, but that you have a plan, you have a pattern, you know what to expect. And so it doesn't seem quite so paralyzing, right? Like right now, it's funny, I'm putting together all sorts of ads for this upcoming group coaching that I'm doing. And it's specifically for people dealing with grief from trauma or loss. And I just find myself saying these things, so often about how people get to learn their own healing patterns and grieving patterns. And if you want to borrow mine, that works too, right? But
Yeah, exactly.
like I've done the work for you, right? But without these methods or without knowing your own pattern, it is so like pain and grief and heartache can be so overwhelming and paralyzing, right? Okay, anyway, enough. So the SMILE method. So S is for shock. I don't think we need to go into what shock is. M is for mock acceptance. Mock acceptance is the part denial and part acceptance. So this is when you are one day you're ready, you're like, let's take the example of someone passing in your life. First you go through the shock, then you do this mock acceptance thing, and that's some days you want to get out of bed, sometimes you want to like conquer the world, you're nailing the logistics down of the funeral, the memorial service, the celebration of life, and then literally the next day you can't get out of bed because because of your grief. It's just terrifying and terrible and heavy. And then the next day you're like, yes, I'm jazzed. Let's do this. Right. So it's like, I believe it's the mind, heart, and body, and the mind, body, heart, and soul, allowing the information to sink in. Right. So it's like the shock, and then you're like, ah. So then we have in overwhelmed. So in overwhelmed are the poignant and significant emotions that we all go through in life. And if we're using the same story as before, example before, the in overwhelmed is the moment that everyone leaves your house after the celebration of life, and you collapse on the couch and you start watching a Netflix show and you just start bawling. Or a couple days later, you're watching a Netflix show and you start laughing and you can't stop laughing. So it's like, or there's anger that comes, right? So these are all of the feelings that we feel. And I just want to point out that I'm going to point this out several times, that the only way through those emotions are through. There's no workarounds. I love telling people to get acquaintanced with anger, their anger, get acquaintance, like become, you don't have to be BFFs with your anger, but I want you to be friends. I want you to be friendly with your sadness. I want you to be friendly with your happiness. I want you to be friendly with disappointment, embarrassment, because I want you to be able to identify the feelings that you're feeling and the emotions that are going on for you. So that's all the in overwhelmed section. And if you don't feel those feelings, you will never get to the other side, which is learning. The L is for learning. It's not just about learning what to do and what not to do next time around. This is actually gaining profound insight. So an easy example for this is a breakup, right? Like, what did I do to contribute? Because I believe in at least 50% accountability, if not more, all the time. So, and that's just me. So what is my accountability? What could I have done better? What did I do that I thought was good? And then thinking about it from the other person's perspective too. Like, what could they have done better? So it's understanding which patterns have moved you to this point, and then which patterns you need to either remove from your life or work on, right? And that's what therapists and coaches and plant medicines and therapy, we'll talk about all that stuff, is all for, right? So after the learning stage, which I believe, and by the way, this isn't a chronological, like I believe that maybe the first time you go through this, it's chronological, but you can go all the way around, because grief is messy and grief is chaotic, and there's no
it's definitely not a
wrong way.
linear way.
It is
Grief is not
definitely
linear. Yeah.
Right. I just want people to know that too, because like once you get to the E, which is embrace, and you are grateful for what's happened to you, or you are paying it forward if in some way, or you are blessed to have had this person in your life, when you have really embraced, because think about it, like acceptance is just no longer enough anymore. We need to enthusiastically embrace that which has happened to us to get to the next level of life. So I often tell people, this is, again, a not a linear process. You can literally, there are triggers. There's always going to be triggers, right? Like my mother-in-law passed a year and a half ago, and anything we see about mothers, like on Netflix, any movie or on Amazon, anything is a trigger for my husband, right? And so in those moments, he's then triggered back to the in overwhelmed him, right? Feeling the feelings again. And then he has to literally go through the process again. So that's why I'm saying it's not linear. We go back, we go forwards, 2 steps back, two steps forward, 1 step back. It's all over the place. And that's okay.
And that's okay. Exactly.
That's
it's
absolutely
totally okay. Yeah.
So I think that the SMILE method is really interesting for any type of current adversity. So my courses, I have people share like something they're going through now, and then I have them share like, where are you in the process, and tell me about your shock, tell me about your mock acceptance, because I've seen people be in shock for months or years even, right? And I've seen people been in mock acceptance for decades, to be honest, right? Anyway, so that's the SMILE method. That's just one. Is there any questions?
Well, when we talk about the SMILE method, so we're talking about stuff that's going on right now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then as we transition now into the healing method, we're talking about stuff that has happened.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about the healing one.
Oh, hello there. It's Glenn, the voiceover artist. And if you're hearing me, that means we're at the midpoint of this episode. Do you have an idea for an episode that you feel is vital for emerging leaders? Leave the idea in the comments section, and if your topic is chosen, you will have the opportunity to join us as a co-host during the recording session. So, drop us a note and let's talk. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you, and if you feel we've earned it, please tell your friends and leave a review to help us grow our following. And now, back to the show.
All right. So now we have the grace method. The grace method is, as you said, is for healing the past once and for all. So the G is for going deep. I believe there's 3 parts to this. The first one is telling your story and to someone that you trust, someone that will support you, someone that will love you no matter what, no judgments. And I want you to sit down with this person and tell them the most exaggerated version, the most dramatic version of your story ever, so that they hear it. It's kind of like you're telling them for the last time ever. That's the first way to tell your story. The second way to tell your story, which is the most difficult, is to tell it from the other person or the other side of the story. So this is easier. It's easier to give an example of a breakup, right? But like, for example, I had a breakup years and years ago, and it took me a long time to get over it. So when I finally, even as I was writing the book, I realized, oh my God, I'm telling the story from his perspective. And I learned so much more about him, and it helped me heal that much more. So once you have your version and the other person's version, then you go into the responsibility, which is the R. So the responsibility and accountability. So now that we all know there's 3 versions to every story, right? Their version, our version, and the truth. So I love to have people now in the 3rd version of this retelling of the story to share with me what they've learned. And now what is the true story as best and as objectively as they can say it. And where is their accountability and where is their responsibility in it? Because if we don't take accountability or responsibility for what we've done, we're not growing, we're not evolving. And that's the point, I think, of life, besides to live, right? So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I agree with you that evolution is a part of it, and understanding how we're going to adjust and make changes as we need to or not. It depends. It's like you said earlier, it's not a chronological step. It's about moving forward. And when we're talking about these ideas from the perception of an emerging leader, understanding that the mistakes that you made in the past are not defining how you're going forward. It's what you choose to do with those errors, or not even the errors, the experiences. It's not defining things. It's a part of who you are. Use it, embrace it, and go forward. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. I love it. It's so true. It's so true. Okay. So ACE. So the A is for activating emotions. It's the same thing as the in overwhelmed them, but this time you are activating emotions intentionally to move forward. There's people that haven't dealt with deaths in their lives for years and years and years, or ever. And so they get to feel the anger again. So it's the same in overwhelmed them. It's just in a different kind of intentional setting. Whereas the first one, you're going through it, right? In the SMILE method, you're actually going through it now. The grace method, I want you to recall the anger, recall the sadness and the frustration and the disappointment and the embarrassment and the guilt and the shame, blah, blah, blah. So once you move through that, again, you have to move through that. You have to go through that. Then you get to compassion, which is the C. I believe that this is probably one of the toughest parts of it's because it's about forgiveness. And it's not always, the toughest part is not always forgiveness for the other person. In my case, if you read the book, like the toughest was forgiving myself for having done this to him. So compassion is, I think, the ultimate form of forgiveness, right? And then once you come into the compassion, or once you pass the compassion, you have E for evolve, which we were talking about. If you don't go through all these other steps, you will never evolve. You will not grow, so taking people through this method is always really eye-opening. And I learned so much from other people, which is so cool about what I do, right? They're I'm not only helping them, they're also helping me because I learn and gain so much like wisdom and experience from other people and their choices, right? Um, yeah, they want me to say one more thing about this, that's exactly what it is, choice, right? Like everything in our life is a choice. And this is one of the things I bring home and throughout the intuitive leadership. I choose to wake up in the morning. I choose to brush my teeth or not. I choose to go outside, go for my walk, get my 10K steps, or I could choose to walk into the road and get hit by a bus, or I could choose to go to Timbuktu. Everything in life is a choice. And I think once we realize that and once we really understand that, we then take accountability for every moment and every choice that we make. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And it is about that accountability and understanding that choices have been made in everything we do, whether or not we recognize that choices have been made, we are most definitely making them. And they're there.
Yeah.
Conscious or
Yeah.
unconscious, the choices have been made.
Yeah, absolutely. Ooh. All right. So moving along, I promise everyone that the next five principles will not be as long as those three, but
There,
those three are the most important,
there is
I think.
nothing to apologize for. These processes, if we glossed over the process, I think that a lot of the items are lost in the importance and why you're bringing them up. So don't give it a
Yeah.
second thought. It was
Okay.
important.
I appreciate that. All right. So next we move on to integration. Um, I believe that integration is the difference between healing like once and healing long term. So I tell my clients to leverage their bliss. So once they've learned their pattern, that they've learned something from one adversity in their life, they get to practice that every day. And I call it leveraging their bliss. So this is where integration is where therapy, coaching, K therapy, some of my friends are doing that now, personal development workshops, all of that takes place now in the process, right? So after you found your healing process, after you've healed, then we come into altered states of consciousness, right? So I'm a huge fan of plant medicines, whatever that is for you. And then there's like this, whenever I do plant medicines, I always create an intention for the journey that I'm going to have, right? And I think it's really important to then reflect afterwards with someone you support, you love, you trust, who's not going to judge you. Um, and this is, in this week, we talked a lot about discernment, right? Between current state and future state, and what that looks like. We also touched upon resilience and what that looks like, what that is. And the most important part is about rewriting your past. As you were just talking about, we can heal from our past and then never use that information or knowledge for the future. But if we literally rewrite our past, we can reframe what we've been through, reframe our present, and then essentially create a new future. And I have a little story. It's funny, the word reframing has been in my life for a long time. When I was 21, I went on like the spiritual journey and I did all this breath work and was getting into yoga. And I had a hand reading, which is so cool. I highly recommend it for everyone. And this guy literally told me, you are going to be your reframer. And I'm like, what is that? Like, I had no idea what that was. I was 21. And he's like, you take complex concepts and break it down so that everyone can understand them. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, because at that point, there was nothing in my mind about this. But it's turned out to be one of my favorite words in my life. And I think that's what I do. That's what I strive to get better at too, is reframing so that people, and we're going to talk about this later, but when you meet people where they're at, which is one of I think the most important and incredible discoveries of my life. I'll tell you that story later. You need to be able to reframe whatever is happening. So integration, super important to leverage the bliss, leverage what you've learned every day. Because again, isn't it like 28 days to form a habit or something? So I tell people 56, 84, whatever, like make sure you form this habit. So then we go into what I call reinvention. And this is where you find clarity and essentially find purpose. You work on your compassion, you work on your forgiveness, you work on reimagining your future. And together we work on what self-care looks like. And I believe that this is where I always tell people to start seeking adventure and seeking joy in their life. Um, because, and by the way, finding purpose is not easy. It's not an easy task, right? But I do help my clients to figure out a vision. It's because once you've learned certain things, it can change the rest of your life, right? Like I've seen people in front of me heal. Like I have a woman that I sat with once and once only. And in that session, it was mediumship and also coaching, but I connected her with her mother, and she was so depressed. And this was 25 years later. She had done all the therapy, all the things, and and within one session, I told her like 5 things about her mother. I was like, I know that she passed when you were out of the room. She did that purposefully. And I said a couple other things. And I was like, and I know you have this beautiful figurine that was in the hospital with you. And she lost it, started crying and bawling. And she's like, oh my God, for 25 years, I've regretted leaving that room, you know? And so after that, like I had to talk to her after and like kind of coach her into like integrate that into her life, because it was you could see the whole room was like, oh my God, like the weight just lifted from the room. So it's so important to not only integrate, but then talk to people about like, okay, what are you going to do with that now? Like, are you going to help other mothers or other daughters of women who've died? Like, what is your next kind of path on that? Because I believe in paying it forward. Not only did I love that movie, but I believe in it 100%.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, like there is so much in all of that, and the need for leaders to be able to let go of the things that their perceptions of things and what they think is going on, the power of that guilt that they carry going forward, and that affects decisions that are being made, how the type of leaders are going to be. It's all about being honest with yourself and trying to find ways to release that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. So number 5, alignment. I believe aligning your inner and your outer, right? So like the personal, professional selves with who you want to be in the future. Um, this is when we talk about flow and what flow looks like. Because I think I like to use the word alignment and flow interchangeably. And according to Dr. Michael Beckwith, like a visionary and spiritual leader, he always says that the law of attraction works based upon alignment, not necessarily like wanting what you want and feeling what you want, but it's about the alignment of who we are and who we want to be. And that's what brings about the law of attraction. So I think it's fascinating. Then I feel like we then talk about conscious relationships, which are like the definition of relationships in which both parties like feel committed to a sense of purpose. I did write that one down because I wanted to, and that purpose is growth and evolution, right? I want to get that definition correct. But conscious relationships is to better and enhance every relationship that you have. As you're going through this program, and as I've been working with people for years now, I can see the evolution, and it definitely causes not rifts, let's say, but sometimes messiness in people's relationships with others, with their family, because of either they're setting boundaries for the first time, potentially ever, or they're working on themselves so much that it's inspiring or motivating others to either say something or to do the same. So I believe that this is like a ripple effect, right? Especially with the work that we do. So then we talk about giving and receiving. There's fun energy, like kind of exercises. Like I even have one from the Dalai Lama. I have one from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, to help people kind of get into the flow and like, I believe that we give away so much of our energy to other people, right? So this is kind of calling the amazing energy back. Then we talk about gratitude and abundance. And I don't want to diminish the importance of gratitude and abundance. I just want to say, I mean, I think we all know what a gratitude is, and abundance, I think we all know what those are.
I think so too. I also feel that quite often, though, they would tend to get glossed over very quickly in the rush to get through to the end process of something. So, for example, a good example I feel would be when we're talking to our team members or whatnot, saying, "Hey, thanks, good job in that team." Pow, pow, pow. And then you walk out the door, right? Thinking I've just done it. I said thanks. And you might the way it's done matters, and the way it's said is
Yeah.
carries just as much weight, if not more, than the words being said.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And I believe I believe in gratitude journals, or I actually have a audio journal that I keep, but I believe that once you start, I believe that gratitude can actually shift you or us out of any emotion that we're feeling. So if you're feeling like angry and you've been there for a couple, let's say, hours, then I want you to practice gratitude. I want you to just say what you're grateful for. Even if there's one thing that you're grateful for, it starts to shift you out of that feeling. And I've done this so many times, and I've worked with so many people. So gratitude is so, I think it's also like, I think it's up there with awareness for me, is having gratitude. And the more gratitude you have, the more abundance you will feel, and the more abundant you will feel, and the more abundance you can create. So next we get into the intuition part of it, which is very fun. We practice, essentially, I give them exercises, my clients. I talk about the clairs, right? So the clairs are clairvoyance, which is mostly what we've heard of, how we see information, right? So we see information that's not, again, objective or tangible. Clairaudience, which is when we hear information that's not tangible. There's clairsentience, where we feel this information, right? For example, when I was doing readings about 10 years ago, I would feel HIV in my body, and it would have a very specific, it would be different than cancer, which I have had cancer. So it would feel different than cancer. And I would feel like, oh, okay, I have cancer, or oh, okay, I have HIV, I died of AIDS, like that kind of thing. So that's what clairsentience is. There's so many clairs. There's like 15 clairs. Claircognizance is just knowing, so anyway, so we go through all of these, and we identify actually like, what is your either preferred, or where do people receive their information? So I ask people to start listening, and to the subtleties of the world beyond them, right? This is where we get a little woo-woo, but so important.
No, well, absolutely. And I agree. Yes. In the sense that the podcast is talking about how for leaders and stuff like that, yeah, it could be perceived a little bit out there if we want to look at it that way. But my thing is, it's about having an open mind and understanding that just because this is the way we think we're a good leader, or this is the way we need to be as a leader or present as a leader, understand there are other things out there. And that's really the point I'd like to mention here, is just because someone may not understand the different clairs or whatnot, I know I certainly don't. That doesn't mean I don't believe in that. It doesn't mean I can't take a portion of that resonates with me and incorporate that into my Simon leadership style. And that's what I'm hoping people are getting out of this, is to understand there are other things there, and use that to help build our own intuition to help ourselves and our teams.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I think that listening is so important, especially in this kind of intuition practicing section. We start talking to people about finding joy, what that looks like, what they do to calm themselves, what they do to find peace, what they do to find harmony, and connecting to their higher selves. And what I mean by that, from a pragmatic perspective, is just your best self, your optimal self, that which you want to be, that which you strive for, right? So I'm a big fan of having objectives and goals and dreams. And so this is where we tap into that. And so when I say higher self, anytime I say that, I just mean your objectives, your goals, who you want to be in the future. Mm-hmm. So number 7, for the 7th principle, is all about celebration. There's a lot here, but I believe even when I say the word celebration, like my energy and vibration shifts. So this is where we start talking about vibration and frequency, about like where you are, like energy wise. You can come into a room and you can say, oh my God, like I just experienced, or no, let's take your example that you just said, like you all did the most amazing job on this. Like the project, the CEO loves it. He's incredible. You can go on for like 3 or 4 minutes and you can feel it, and everyone in the room feels it. And then you can, and then it's like, oh wait, what we're going to talk about, and then go back to whatever you were going to talk about, right? Like get so lost in that beautiful feeling of gratitude and that energy, right? Or you can come in and, like you said, like, nice job, guys, the CEO loves it, and then move on. So there's a huge frequency difference and energy difference, which that's the subtlety. It's subtle, but that's where I start helping leaders recognize what their vibration is and what their frequency is.
Yeah, and knowing when to use. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just
No,
had.
no.
Okay, sorry. So for me, it's about understanding when to know, because sometimes it is about kind of shooting from the hip and be like, "Good job," because people maybe just want to get home at the end of the day, you know. But if there's time, maybe they're tired and they need that, lengthy a gratitude. Who knows? It's using your intuition to know the room. It's about reading the room
Absolutely.
and knowing when. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I was just going to say reading the room. So next we talk about love, because love is what makes the world go round, and love is the most powerful emotion that exists. So like how that plays a part in what we do, right? Like when you work with people that you really enjoy and like, it's so much easier, I think, than working with people that you don't. um, I also believe in finding magic in relationships, and in teams, finding the magic there, or creating, like, I want to say, there's all sorts of team building events, but this is where that would go in. But it's about creating magic together. So instead of doing a team building, like, I don't know, like an escape room, like have them create a project that could help the company, or that could help the world, like finding that beautiful magic. And then from ourselves, finding our magic within, right? And what makes us shine. So this is when we really talk about, like, what makes you the unique you that you are, and celebrate that. I mean, that's what this whole principle is, right? About. Then we talk about empowerment and what that looks like and what that feels like. We talk about what empowers and what disempowers people, and the difference there. And that also then leads into inspiring others. There is, I truly believe myself that one of the best attributes of any leader, or any good leader, is to inspire others and motivate others. And I believe when the Dalai Lama said, be the change we wish to see in the world, I believe in that wholeheartedly. And that's why we celebrate ourselves. We figure out and identify our frequency, our love, our magic, and our shine, and then we can inspire others, because I don't think you can do those things until you can have celebrated yourself, authentically, anyway. So finally, we come to what I call just the intuitive leader, but it's like the eighth step. And this is how to be the most incredible and intuitive leader. Inspiring and motivating others, being honest with yourself, authenticity, what that looks like, consistency. I can't tell you how many leaders have moments of greatness that I've seen, right? Like directors, moments of greatness, but they're not consistent about it. They might congratulate their team in an amazing way, and then the next time just be like, hey, nice job. Like that's like, consistency is really important. And I talk about consistency a lot. Like even today, with a client, I was talking about, she's like, I want more consistency in my life. And I was like, well, what does that look like for you? So we talk about what consistency looks like and what it creates. Then we talk about collaboration, and what that looks like, where people fall under that scale, if they love collaboration, if they don't like it. And then we get to what I think is one of the most important kind of topics, which is meeting people where they're at. Like I told you I was going to tell you a story. So when I was doing all sorts of personal development workshops, I was a part of a group of 38. And in this group of 38, it was all about how to be leaders. And every week we had tasks and homework to do, and it was tough. I'm not gonna lie, it was tough. And I'm an overachiever. I've been called a super overachiever by certain people in my life. And I remember that we were going to kick this one person out because we had the power to do that, right? Like, you're not a leader like us. And I spoke to the, the facilitator, the coach, and he's like, Seth,
Yeah.
do you know that you're a super overachiever? I was like, yes. He's like, so your 100% is probably other people's 150, right? And so maybe someone else's 90 is, I mean, like, he just literally spoke to me in numbers, and I was like, oh my God. So you're saying that she's giving 100%. I just don't see it that way because that's like a 30% on my scale. He's like, yes, exactly. He's like, I would be a little kinder to her if I were you. He's like, and this was like 12, 13, no, 20 years ago, probably. And he literally taught me the most important lesson of my life, which is meeting people where they're at. And we didn't kick her out. I actually saved her because other people were on the same train as I was. And I was like, you know what, guy? Like, you know what, everyone? It's important that she's doing what the best she can. And I think we should celebrate that and reward that. And it took a lot of convincing, but it it is the most important lesson of my life, really, when people ask, like, what's the most important thing you've learned as a leader? But to meet people where they're at. And that leads me to also say that every person that you work with or that works for you needs to be managed in a different style. And that was really tough for me to understand too. It was my first time as a director. I was like, this is amazing, but then like everyone underneath me was like, wait, you need to be managed this way. You need to be managed this way. Like you're tough. And then, so like, and you can then start to understand people's strengths and their areas of improvement, right? And you can work with that. And so that's what I love talking about in the intuitive leader is how to recognize and identify where your teammates are, or your coworkers are, or your, I don't like the word subordinates, but people who work for you, your team is, and then how to work with them on their strengths. And then it's the last thing is about encouragement and support for your team. I think we all need to be coaches as leaders and coach our team to their greatness and to encourage and champion when they need to champion and support when we need to support and meet them where they're at. So all these things together, I think, creates the most intense intuitive leader. And yeah, so that's the eighth principle.
Well, thank you very much for that. I have a couple of points. So the first one
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about is,
Yeah.
is you had spoken about as the intuitive leader. It's about, as we mentioned earlier, it's about reading the room and understanding the group, but it's also about understanding that intuition has to keep going. It's not, okay, I read this person, this is the type of day they're going to have, go forward with that.
Right.
It's an ongoing thing. It's the muscle you have to learn and almost let it do its thing all the time. It's the battery is on in the car all the time, just might not be as engaged as often. So you have to let it go, do its thing, and it will. And as you keep paying attention to the signs that are out there, that's the part of the physical intuition that we might see. And I know for myself, you would use an example, but when you had been in leadership roles, when I was a sergeant, and I was teaching basic training, I came into that position, and at this point I had received two different levels of formalized military leadership training, not education. I came into this role convinced I knew exactly how I was going to teach because I knew everything there was. I'd been in the military for 20 years, 17 years at the time, and I knew it all. And it became very, very clear to me right away that I didn't. And I'd barely been scratching the surface. And what I needed to do to not me be successful, but to help my candidates be successful was to pay attention to what was going on with them and not just the physical aspects. Okay, we're out doing a 5-kilometer run and you're tired. Got it. But what's going on? It's paying attention to like, hey, you're struggling today. Yesterday you were doing great. Now today, what's happening? And realizing that these are people and they have things happening that we don't know about. Mm-hmm. And talking about how your perception of what your 150, what your 100% is not necessarily someone else's 100%. Perception is reality. And so driving going forward, I feel it's about paying attention to those different things. It's about paying attention. That's how I'm interpreting intuition, paying attention to every aspect of everything around you all the time and adjusting as required when you need to. Does that make any sense at all? That was a pretty lengthy explanation, but
no, absolutely. I love the kind of the similarity, like paying attention. I just think it's paying attention to the subtleties, right? Paying attention to the nuances, paying attention to that which is not being said.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. No,
Yeah.
I totally agree. It's those subtleties. And a quick little sidebar note. So you're
Yeah.
talking about the word subordinates. So it's funny, in the military, that's just the word we use. Subordinates, and there's no malice. I'm a master warrant officer. I have 24 subordinates that work beneath me, and I had no problem with that. And when I rolled into this Master of Arts in Leadership degree, I'm the only military person in the cohort, and I'm in all my papers, I'm writing subordinate this and subordinate that. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the term direct reports, and this
Yeah.
was 2019. I had no idea what this was. I'm like, what is a direct report? I actually had to ask him, like, ha ha ha. No, seriously, what is a direct report? And like, oh no, the people that report directly to you. I'm like, oh, my subordinates. You would think that I had gone to these people's houses and slapped their children. They were so offended. I'm like, what is the problem here? And like, that's offensive and this and that. I'm like, okay, let's all take a breath. Perception is reality. This is my world. This is the word we
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for it because of the very nature of what a military force, professional military force is meant to do. But at the same token, we just hadn't got caught up, and we're starting to see terms like direct reports and those things. And now I'm back in the military as a reservist, so a part-time soldier. So I have my full-time
Mm.
civilian job and I have my
Okay.
part-time military job, and I balance between the two. And it's challenging because I'll be
Wow.
honest, after 26 years, my entire adult life, my military brain really, really wants to take over and say, okay, just call everyone subordinates, be done with it. But no, there's a reason why we have these terms. And that's my long-winded Simon point to say that is just because I want to do something a certain way, I have to look at the broader picture. And as a new leader, it's about looking at that broader perspective, using the subtleties to help us see them and try our very, very best to put the biases to the side to allow us to use our intuition in a way that's going to help everyone. Does that make sense?
Awesome.
You're the
Well
expert.
said. No, I was just going to say amen, but well said.
Oh,
Well said.
fantastic. Great. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Well, listen, before we move into the lightning round, we've had a very
Yeah.
comprehensive discussion about intuition. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, let me kind of relax, and I will actually let like kind of someone else, kind of a guide or someone like the universe, maybe say some things,
Yeah.
or lead, I guess. Um, okay. So, and you see me, I'm just looking off to the side, but um, to lead people is one of the most important roles we have in this world. And to lead someone to their greatness also helps us in so many ways. And to inspire and motivate people is also one of the marvelous things we get to do in this world. And I also agree with what they're saying, but inspiring and motivating others allows us to experience not only their greatness, but also to learn so much about life. Um, and if the purpose of life is to live, right, then leading becomes an extension of that. And so we get to help the team around us, our direct reports, our subordinates, our coworkers, even our managers and directors and VPs and above. We get to make life easier for them. And that's why when I have a team, I always say, do your magic, work your magic, because you make me look good. And I will do anything I can to protect you there and inspire you and motivate you and champion you whenever possible, whenever needed. So, and then they want to mention something about the coaching again, how important it is for leaders to coach their employees. It's not about giving advice always. Um, it's not about showing them how to do it. Sometimes it's about letting them experience it themselves. So giving them that freedom to do that. That's important too. I think that's good. That was a
Oh,
combo. Yeah.
okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Well, listen, Seth, we have had a fantastic chat. We've talked a lot about intuition and how leaders need to remember. I don't like to use the word need so much, but how it's imperative for leaders to understand that paying attention to themselves and what's going on, using all of their senses, can indeed help them be a better, more powerful, impactful leader for themselves, their organizations, and most importantly, their teams. So, but before we say goodbye, I'm just curious, if people want to reach out to you, they want to take advantage of your different services, how can they do that?
The best way to find me is iamsethelliott.com. And or on socials, I'm pretty much Seth Elliott Santoro, 1L, 1T, Seth Elliott Santoro, pretty much everywhere. TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, all those places.
Okay, fantastic. And of course, we'll have links to those contact notes inside the show notes. And from there, that's it. I think we're done. Thank you so much for everything today. This has been a fantastic chat, and I'm excited to get together with you at some point in time and have another talk.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. Also, I forgot there's a free gift, right?
Oh, yes.
We're going to give them.
Right.
Don't want to forget that.
Yeah. Hit us.
There's like, I believe that I've given you links to 3 different separate infographics. So one is for the eight principles of intuitive leadership, which would be most apropos. And then I also included 2 links for the SMILE method and the GRACE method. So if you forgot anything I spoke about today, definitely check those infographics out.
Well, thank you so much
to you and your audience.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that. That is so much appreciated. And thanks again for your time today. This has been a lot, and it's been informative and impactful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. See you soon.
Well, that's a wrap from the front. In this episode, we talked about intuitive leadership. We talked about how important it is for leaders to really pay attention to themselves and pay attention to their environment so that they can pay attention to their people. Are we starting to see a theme? Are we starting to see a theme here? It's about paying attention to your people and ourselves. We can be the change that we wish to be in this world. We just need to figure out how we're going to do that. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, leadership without passion limits the depth of your vision.
Never miss an episode by following us on all of your favorite feeds. While you're there, please consider leaving an episode review and let us know what topics you would like to hear about. Be sure to join us next week with your host, Simon Cardinal, for another episode of Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front, produced by iGlen Studios, music provided by Ashamal of Music.